Welcome. Before we start drawing, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land on which we are producing this series, the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation, and to show my respect to their elders past and present and emerging, and to all First Australian with us today. Carmel, I'm going to hand you over to Carmel.
Okay, so last session we looked at tone. We looked a bit deeper into tone and revealed the layering process of tone and building up a drawing. This session I'm going to look at projection with tone. So artists don't just copy the world, we interpret the world. So we usually think about the overall mood of an artwork and we achieve that through tone. So tone, or value is another word for tone, works on two levels. First level is you're describing form. We're describing form by using light and dark and all the steps in between of tone. The other aspect of tone is the overall feel of a painting or a drawing has a mood. So today we're going to do a very simple approach with the same still life again, and I'm going to project onto the drawing the feeling of summer. So if you're looking at tone and you want like a dark wintry feel, you'll probably just keep your tonal range between at the bottom of this scale. However, you have to have lights in there. It's just that the percentage of light in a very dark drawing to depict winter, the percentage would be very low. But with summer, it's flipped. So a majority of the light in your artwork would be from mid-tone up, and some darks in the shadows, because shadows on a hot summer's day are very sharp. So we're going to start again with the willow charcoal to start the structure of the drawing, compressed charcoal, compressed pencil charcoal, a rag, the eraser, nice sharp edge, kneadable eraser, and what I'm adding is this charcoal dust. So this is really fun. It's very quick, it speeds up the drawing, and let's get going. Okay, you see I've already drawn the frame on my page, and you'll see here there's a little frame with lots of blocks in it. We usually go 1 to 9, and I'm going to use that as a tonal chart. So at the bottom of this chart will be the darkest area, and at the top is the lightest, and in the middle is the mid-tone. And that's just a little guide, just to remind you that tones are a stepping process, so we can do that as we go. So as usual, I have my frame. I'm going to start placing the objects on the page, starting off with the closest objects where that meets the plane of the table. And then from there I can use directional lines. This is all the structure part of the drawing, always in willow charcoal, because it wipes off really easily. So there's the first object, vertical axis, measuring the top of that can come across. And from this horizontal line I can work out the third object. But I think before I put the vertical axis for that, I need to do a little bit of mapping. I think I might just do... It's not really a blind contour, it's just really putting the shape of that object in. So I think I can already tell now I'm going to run off the top of the page. So I'm going to take all that off, move this object down already, vertical axis, shape, just general shape. You can only really get close to the actual shape with the blind contour. And then the top of that object, taking my vertical line across. I think that should go a bit higher. constantly, at this stage of the drawing, it's really constantly changing. Because you're mapping it. It's a map. You'll never get it right the first time. Vertical over there. And yeah, at least come a bit low. I'm just looking at the top of the page and looking at the vase, and I just know it's not going to fit there. So I think it's about there. Take this up. Still mapping. Just doing a shape, not really a blind contour. I will come in later and do the blind contours because they are actually really important. Not just to get sort of this shape accurate, but also to get a bit of feeling into the drawing with the blind contours. Top of that object travelling across space to the top of this one, and the distance between the top of that and this bottle here looks pretty good actually, so pretty sure that's going to fit on the page. Okay, so I'll come down on the vertical axis here, but from there, come over here. I'll try and speed up this process a bit because tone, this usually is the slowest part of a drawing because it's a lot easier to change the structure at this stage rather than changing it later. But building up tone does take time. So I think I've pretty much got my composition now. I don't have the shapes quite right yet, but I can do that as I go. So what I'm going to do when I build up the tone now, I want to get like a feeling. I want to actually project part of myself onto this artwork because I think that's what artwork is. It's a meeting between you as a person, three-dimensional space, and the objects, and I'm projecting onto those objects either a metaphor or maybe just a feeling. It can be anything really, but that's the conceptual aspect of the drawing. So to keep it really simple, I'm just going to use the concept of seasons, and the season that I want to be felt in this drawing is summer. So that means the light, the tone, will be pretty much from this mid-tone up to here. However, the objects, that's for the overall drawing, feeling of the drawing, but the objects themselves need to include the darkest areas as well. So it works on two levels: composition, concept, describing form. Tone works on two levels like that. Okay, so can always start with willow, so I'll just quickly get some. This is the darkest object, so I'll put a bit of tone on there. And so I'm just looking at shapes right now of tone. Just to get something in. So now I think I know that that bottle's out, I need to redraw that. So I'm going to switch my brain into blind contour. So that means I change the pace of what I'm drawing. It's a slow process because I'm sort of just really feeling. See, when you do a blind contour, you get things like angles right quite easily. Things that memory don't really think about, because that's part of the battle of working with still life, with objects. Life model, it's the same thing. Is that to not let memory take over the drawing. Okay, that's gone out of scale, so because I'm at the beginning of the drawing, I can just do that. And because I've already done my immediate memory now, all of this research here is still in my head, so I can actually very quickly actually readjust, go back in and redraw to the scale that I need. switch into a quick contour. Then now I'm going to start finding the relationships between these bottles. Put in a little bit, then I just switch to tone. It's constantly switching in your head, and I think that's why it's so engaging. It's challenging, and it's really helping me exist right here. So I think this is out, I think, because this bottle needs to come down here a bit like that. So then I can make that adjustment. Coming up here. Okay, so that's better because it fits. It's good to have a bit of space at the top. Bit of a blind contour. You can see that needs to come out. This is actually quite a complicated shape, this little... It's a turned wood, I think. Okay, so now I'm happy with that. I think I might work out summer. Might put my horizon line. I can either put that, okay, well the last drawing we had the horizon line of the edge of the table below the top of the that object. So I'll put it above this time and we can just see the difference, feeling that that gives to the drawing. Okay, so I can make little adjustments as I go now, but I like the feeling of that. That's still a line drawing, so now I'll be switching into tonal thinking and observation. So thick willow, thin willow, compressed charcoal, compressed pencil, white pastel. I didn't mention that earlier. We'll be introducing white pastel as well. And I need to keep the tone, so I can make that a bit darker there. Start working on this. I need to, for the overall feeling of the drawing, I want the tone to stay on this edge, on the lighter section of the tonal scale. So this is like really, it is direct, moving it up and down, just adjusting it. I think the top one is the lightest one, but I think you should just have a tiny little tone in there. Let's move it around with the eraser. That activates it as well. Charts like this are really good for just practicing very simple skill-based exercises, because you don't have to think about form, you're just really practicing the application. Okay, so they come down by steps. So this step needs to be a little bit darker than that. That should be a bit lighter, I think. Blend that one. So this is like a really simple way of showing that what happens in a drawing, how you're adjusting tone all the time. And I'll go in and do those ones later. Okay, so summer. Now I'm projecting. 3 objects, I've been drawing them a lot in the last few weeks. I think I've worked out their relationship, how they relate to each other. So that's the forms and how they relate together. But now I want to project a feeling onto the overall drawing. So thinking of summer, I think I can think of a light source. Summer is light, you have very long days, you have a lot of daylight, you have a lot of light in general. So I can probably think, well, maybe there's a window somewhere and there's a lot of light coming into the room because the objects are on a table. So I don't really want to literally have a window because that would be complicated. If it was like a very big drawing, maybe I would do that. But for me, it's a little bit too literal. So I just want the feeling that there's a window off the side and there's a shaft of light coming into the room. So I can apply it just to activate the space a little bit. I can just apply it with some willow charcoal. Again, secure in the knowledge that I can lift it off the page quite easily. That's my little security, not getting back to the ground. I can use the edge of the eraser to blend it. And I don't think I showed actually what I use for the erasers. This is like a piece of quite rough sandpaper, stapled to a piece of wood. So the erasers get quite dirty with the charcoal. So if I need to get back to a nice clean eraser, you just clean it on this sandpaper. One of my students made this for me, and I thought he was a genius because I was just using a tiny little piece of sandpaper before. So there you've got a nice clean eraser back, and it can work to its full function when it's clean. So I'm not going to lift it, I just want to blend this a little bit because we're talking about space here, so just activate that space a little bit. I want to push some of the charcoal into the page, but not all of it. Okay, so I think I need to develop this part of the drawing a bit more to really work out what value that background should be. Its true value. So that line isn't really doing anything for me. I'm just going to get rid of it. This was a measuring line, so I can get rid of that now. These lines here are activating, they're making the objects, it's animating the objects. And even though objects look inanimate, they are actually quite animate. There's space inside, there's energy running around them. So I can just, this is what we call gesture drawing, just working the energy. And see, if I'm doing that with the eraser, I'm actually getting rid of some of that line work, but it's actually also adding the feeling of the object. Okay, so now I'm going to work with form on the objects, which means I need to use the full scale of the tone because I'm not thinking about mood now, I'm thinking about capturing the form. So I'll use the compressed charcoal and the willow and the eraser at the same time. Okay, so this is my darkest object, so I might just start gently putting in some tone and see the mark making is still describing the form. It's the darkest area, so I think I'll come in. Now I'll do a blind contour. I can see now that it's actually not long enough, which might mean I need to move that horizon line up. Blind contour, really get that shape, which is actually quite a beautiful shape. So that proportion of the neck to the body of the object is a lot better now. So now I'm switching to looking at tone. And I can see I need to lift, there's a bit of light just running around the lip. So I'm drawing that back in with the eraser. And then this is quite dark behind there, so I'll come back in. A bit of line work with the nice sharp. I use these to keep them because they're very sharp and I get a point. So you need a good knife or a sharpener to keep it. I can just blend it a little bit. It's quite dark down here. Might speed that up with the, I'm going to break that in half because it's too long. Speed that up with the compressed. And from here, that's the closest point on that object. It's coming forward, that's behind, then it comes forward, then it's pushing back again down to the bottom. So I almost sort of want to describe that as well. So it's like closest point, moving away, so I press a bit harder. Put a bit more pressure. Then now I'm moving the charcoal, which is really important. I'm adding charcoal, I'm subtracting charcoal, and I'm also moving it around. I don't want this to be as dark, so I'll try it with willow first. But you can see willow is like grey, it really isn't, it's not black at all. Mark making, still describing the form. Coming around. Okay, so I'll keep moving on. Put some shadows in there, shadows down there. See, I can do this fairly loosely because I know I'll be moving the charcoal later on, which helps me free up. I can refine it, refine the drawing, because I can move that charcoal around. So they're all like, almost like psychological, they assist me psychologically because I don't need to worry about the drawing because I know that I can move the charcoal around to refine it. So now, when you're actually really in the zone, you just switch from contour to tone, you don't even really need to think about it. You just look at the drawing, look at what it needs, and you just switch. So I won't talk so much, and you just watch me switch from contour to tone as I go. Okay, need to redraw this. This is the lightest object. Now I'll use the stump for this one. It's gone a little bit too dark, so I'll get the kneadable eraser, lift. Okay, so the objects are kind of on their way. And I need to start working out the overall feeling of the drawing. So that's my lightest area. So I think this needs to come down a tone and that needs to come up a tone to make it feel a little bit more like summer. And this, I think because I'm imagining the light coming from this direction, I think I can lighten up this side of this object a little bit. Maybe darken that. But it's all like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm kind of just exploring it. But what I do know is how to use my mediums. And I know I can always get back to the ground, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so now I'll get some charcoal dust and I apply this with just a cotton ball. And what is great about this is it's quick, and I'm just applying it quite lightly. I don't want to push it in because I'm really going to probably lift most of it back off again. I might put a little bit down there. And see how that's actually activated that surface already, just from the movement of applying it. So I quite like that, but I think it's too activated, and that plane is quite flat. So I'll just move the charcoal around, flatten most of it. Stop and look, because you need to do that with your drawings. So this horizon line needs to come up a little bit. So I'm going to redraw the edge of that table, because I think it was, if it's there, that's the proportion of the edge there with the top of that bottle isn't very, I just know this from experience. I know that's not going to work. And I think that is too far away, so I think it needs to come down. So I'll work out the relationship here first. So I think that's quite a nice proportion, so I'll stick with that. So I can even make that a double edge. I might decide to take that out or leave it in. Let me see. So this one we can either come across and have it exact, but I actually don't think it's meeting that very well, so I might drop it a little bit and just put it down there. Because I'm not illustrating, I'm interpreting. That tone needs to come up a little bit, but I'll come back to it, because I'm going to just think about this little area here. So now what I'm going to do is just really let some light back in the background. And we're just dealing with light and space. So my interpretation of that really is just movement. So they do actually get blunt pretty quickly, the erasers. So I'm quite often I would be just cutting the eraser to get the edge back. It is a bit messy with all this erasing. So I might come back to here. So I still don't have quite that dark, but I know that underneath the objects is usually one of the darkest areas, and there's usually a little bit of light next to the dark edge. That's that. Let's have a look at this. That needs to come darker. I might put it like this. So you can see the tooth of the page coming through there, which is making that slightly lighter than this one, where I've really pushed the charcoal in. I'm going to make that dark. Do you notice if you blend it, over blend it, it actually changes the tone. And I hope that can go a little bit darker. Next step. That's the mid. I think that probably needs a little bit of compressed. Blend. And I might just lift this one a bit. This is just a little reminder that you're just working with tone to describe form and mood, and that tone is constantly adjustable. You can keep moving up the scale to light and down the scale to dark. So now I'm still not getting much of a summery feeling from it. I think I need to bring the tone up again, and maybe this dark object needs to come up. So I think I really need to, what I call, go in and attack the drawing a little bit more. So I think this needs to come up. I'm using the long edge of the eraser. So I'm really blocking in. This is also called blocking in. You use it with painting. You're blocking in big areas quickly. And it helps get the drawing moving or painting. Okay, so now I really need to start imagining just beautiful summer light coming through here, projecting onto the drawing. Atmosphere, which creates a mood, or an atmosphere that creates a mood. Because we're working in a high key, because we're up the top of the tonal scale up here, line work is probably going to be predominant in the drawing. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but I think with something so light, it would take a long time to have very subtle tones to pull forward the form. I actually think it's quite a good exercise, but it's not for this little session. So I think we've got light coming through there. I think we can have a bit of light around here. And I actually love this process of just blocking in around, like drawing the negative space around an object to emphasise the object. It's one of my favourite things. So now what I'm thinking is, okay, this is a table, so it's quite flat. It's a flat plane. So I might pick the direction. Gentle willow charcoal here. A few shadows. So with a very strong light, there really aren't, shadows tend to be sharp, depending on where the sun is. So I'm pretty happy with this, but I'm not really happy with the atmosphere in the background, so now I'm going to pull in a white pastel. I usually leave the pastels until late in the drawing because you can't really get back to the ground after you start applying the pastel. So I'm usually pretty sure where I am at the stage of the drawing when I apply it, but when I do apply it, I do it really free. I'm not like scared of the pastel. I just know that I need to, because you can see it changes the tone a little bit. I just know I need to save it till the end of the drawing. And you kind of apply it the same as you do the charcoal, really. It's kind of like, so you can see that, how that's sort of like it's a dead space, but that's activated this space now. It's almost, because it's a slightly darker tone than the page, it's kind of pushed the whole thing forward. Push the objects forward and definitely change the feel of that drawing. So I like that. However, it's too separate to this, and I need to add some pastel down here. But now I do need to be really careful, because if I overdo it, I don't think it'll work. So I'll just sort of take it nice and easy. And yeah, just again, now I'm going to look back at the still life and just follow nature, see what it's doing, and just gently add just a bit of, maybe just down in this corner here. I actually quite like that, this little area here. I don't mind the page coming through there. And then I think I'll just add some highlights on here with the pastel. That's the other thing you can do. Highlights, like light reflecting off the objects, are usually the last things that you add to still life. And what the pastel also does is it blends. You can blend it. You can put a bit of like, this is compressed charcoal, so it's quite dark. You can blend it in and actually, that's too dark a tone, but if I just blend a bit of pastel into it, it actually brings the tone up a little bit. Just enough. And then what I can also do with the pastel is use it as line work as well. So that now I have like a combination of dark charcoal and pastel. So then I go through and I get rid of lines that I think aren't really helping the drawing. So that's looking a little bit dead, that object now, so I'm going to activate it with a bit more line work. I think there is a shadow coming from here that's pretty important, especially if you're thinking that the light coming from there. You could probably darken this area a little bit. Don't think it's really that necessary, because especially if it changes the mood, because I do want it to feel summery. That was okay. I don't think it's that great an idea. See what happens when I go over. Still not 100% sure what I'm doing. But that's the fun of drawing. It's all about discovering. Okay, so there's a drawing that's in a high key, and if I'm thinking of a season, it's definitely summer. So that was summer. I projected summer onto that drawing. To fully comprehend that exercise in a very simple way would be to draw a summer version of a very simple still life and a winter version of a very still life. And the winter version will be using the tonal scale towards the bottom of the value scale and summer at the top. So I hope you enjoyed that. So thanks for joining me in my studio. I hope you enjoyed the tutorials. And most importantly, I hope they've inspired you to join the Young Artist Award. So all the best and see you around.